Welcome, everybody, to the show. This is Counterclipping show number 197 for November 4th, 2024. And I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight. Our topic is the language of wargaming, and I'll get into what I mean by that in a bit. We've got actually rather a lot of news items tonight. So we are drinking Glendronach 12. It is a sherried scotch bottled at 43%, which is responsible of them. And it is very good, and I haven't had it in quite a while. And don't think this has not been remarked upon. I'm probably shaving it after I get back. We'll talk about that as well. So anyway, I want to thank everybody once again for coming out tonight and remind you all to please thumbs up the video or like it or whatever it is that's happening on whatever platform that you're on, and subscribe to the channel. Big shout out to the patrons of Ardwulf's Lair, without whose assistance and support and encouragement it would not be possible to keep doing this. And a big shout out to the sponsor of the Counterclipping show, our good friends at Noble Knight Games. We will have a campaign update this evening, as those of you who have participated in the Ardwulf's Lair Discord server may already know, because I posted a picture either yesterday or today. Did I post a picture? I thought I did. Maybe I didn't. In any case, we do have a campaign update tonight, so thank you, Noble Knight, for that as well. Super chats and super stickers are on as usual. If you want to do that, it is a great way to support the channel, as well as a good way to get your comment highlighted so that I do not miss it. I have been a bit better lately at seeing most of the comments, but the volume of folks here every week is simply too high for me to keep up with 100% of the time. So there's that. And there's a bunch of other ways and links to support the channel in the video description, so check all that out. And I've already mentioned that. So before we go any further, where is the actual screen for this? Let's say hello to Alistair Logie, Board Gaming Geezer, Chad Kennedy, Chet Bell, Chris Yap. Is it Yap or Jap, Chris? Let me know. Daniel Silverthorne, Danny Seckery, Dave Poirier, let me know. David Zell, Doug Blayart, Egret, Fidelis, welcome to the show. Henry Hartman, welcome to the show. HUN644 New, Jeff Beeler, Jeffrey Edwards, Joe Faust from sunny Northeast Ohio, and it actually was sunny and pleasant here today. I actually got a little bit of leaf blowing done, but I didn't get, it gets dark so early, I couldn't get much done. Joe Hammond, Joe Okobayashi, Joe Perez is here, Joe Mentum, John C. from the sunny Philippines, Jonathan Dyer, Carl Crater from the Wargame Bootcamp, who I expect to see this weekend. Lee Grant, Mark G, Meandering Mike, who is on his phone because his power's out. Mike, hopefully that comes back on immediately. Neil Bedke, P51D fan, welcome to the show. Paul Moreldrich, Panzer Division Lair, Paul Dangle, Paul Sin, Paw, Perry Spiropoulos, Philip Musket, Rob Johnson, Royce Stacking Limit, Stigler is in the house. Stuart Ellis Gorman. Stuart, welcome to the show. Good to see you here. Tailwind, Tim Zales, Vicky, welcome back. Vince Ree, Wade Moore, William Bird, and that's it. I apologize to anybody that I have missed. So that is YouTube's fault as usual. So we are clipping Advanced Pacific Theater of Operations. We've probably got one more of these in me before I can actually say that this is finished. So, and the legend himself, Fucko, is in the house now. He wasn't on the list. So let me get to the news first. So for anyone who does not yet know, our friend Mark Ruggiero, who is not doing great, has been selected as the Grognard of the Year by Dan over at No Enemies Here. So big shout out and congratulations to Mark. I wish it was under better circumstances, but I do feel like Mark is doing the best he can given his bad situation. And I don't really have anything new to say. Yeah, potentially, why not? I've actually never played House Divided, so shoot me up and we'll figure it out. So that's awesome. I don't actually have anything formally lined up. I should probably do that this week at SD HistCon. We'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. So, all right, so congrats to Mark Ruggiero, Grognard of the Year. As previously mentioned, the SD HistCon in sunny San Diego, and John C. from the sunny Philippines, if I didn't say hello to you, and it is apparently sunny there. So, both of these things, that is a thing that's getting the details of this are getting talked about. Don't be shocked to find that something like this occurs as well. So In any case, yeah, and Pacificon is named the Wargaming Space after Mark. Mark is very important to the wargaming community and to the hobby, and has been a tireless cheerleader and evangelist, and I mean both of those things in nothing but a positive way for wargaming. I'm going to open this door because it's a friggin' boiler in here. This might mean that we have a special guest appearance by one cat or another. So, oh, that's not a great technique, Brent. Just saying. Just saying. Don't do that. Dumb. Anyway, not that I've done dumber, but that's pretty dumb. So SD Hist is this weekend. I will be departing pretty early in the morning on Thursday and getting home on Sunday night. It is obviously a long flight. I am cheap, so I got the flight with a layover. I think I'm laying over in Charlotte for some unknown and undeterminable reason. So there was back in, this would have been like 91 or something like that, when I was at Ohio State and living in the dorms, there was somebody that put a penny in the microwave down in the student lounge and walked away, and the microwave was on fire 3 minutes later. So I have seen quite dreadful microwave mishaps. So is it worse than someone burnt the popcorn? So, oh yeah, this is bad. Also, microwaving fish at work is a big no-no in my opinion. All right, so once again, reminder, however, because of the trip and because I expect to leave San Diego at 10 in the morning and get home at 1 in the morning here, I am not doing live shows next week. We will hopefully have a couple of actual videos, but about which in a moment. But there will be no counterclipping show and no chit show next week. Brant over at the Armchair Dragoons on their YouTube channel will be filling in at 8 p.m. So tune into that if you are bored and have nothing to do. And Brant, you are, of course, required to run for actually 2 hours. I do, in fact, mean the Ohio State University. That sounded really funny and stilted when I learned that that is the actual name of the institution when I got there. So... and now it has become kind of a thing. I want to say the flight there is a show tomorrow night. I want to say it was $350 or something like that, both ways, which is not bad. It would have been like $550 had I got the nonstop flight, and I'm a cheapskate. So there we go. Yeah, basically, yeah. I'm not hesitant to sleep it off or take a nap, however. So, I'll be okay. And I'm sure tell me there's coffee at this facility, and it's not some nonsense Connecticut bullshit where we don't have coffee after 10 a.m. What? This is unacceptable. So in any case, yeah, it wasn't bad. We'll see how I feel about it later. I'm trying to keep these organized here. So, lemon sorbetto, meandering Mike. That doesn't sound that bad, actually. Might as well eat the ice cream out of I assume that's what you're talking about. So anyway, there's a whole bunch of reasons for this. My technical advice is to clear your browser cache. If you're watching on a browser, which most people are, I actually don't know that, but I haven't, I can't actually check that metric in Google Analytics. I have not done so forever. There's a pretty good fried chicken place. I've flown through Charlotte before. There's a pretty good, I forget what it's called. I'll recognize it if I see it. Pretty good fried chicken place down there too. In any case, anyway, cabbage might actually be worse than this because cabbage is pretty smelly when you're cooking it. I like cabbage personally, though. Good, because there might be an emergency here, okay? I'm not afraid to go to bed early, and I'm not afraid to get up late. So I don't generally, but I usually go to bed around 11:30, something like that. In any case, all right, so we've got more news. No shows next week. There should be some static videos. There are 2 sales that you should be aware of, one of which is happening right now. So let me pull that up. That is Decision's November monthly sale, which is a big box game sale. You buy 1, 2, or 3 games and get a increasing amount of money off. This is substantial considering that these are generally fairly pricey games. So if you've been thinking about any of these, now might be a pretty good time to do so. And if you've been thinking about 3 of them, it might be an even better time to do so. I'm going to throw this link into the throw this link into the chat if anybody wants to hop over there and look at it. Games include Lucky Forward, which is the latest Goss game as of now, but that's not going to be the case for much longer. The Imperium Romanum 3, which I've got, Wellington's Victory, probably don't recommend that one. Atlantic Wall. What else is here? There's got to be more here. It looks like this is it. All right, so Atlantic Wall, which also is a game I like, but you do need the new stuff from Lucky Forward, so I would get Lucky Forward before you get Atlantic Wall if you're new to Goss and don't have Lucky Forward already. Axis Empires Ultimate Edition, which is dynamite, very much in favor of that. It is quite expensive, so now's a good time. Highway to the Reich, I don't have a particular opinion on. I did acquire the Decision version, however, so I might have an opinion on it at some point, and Advanced Pacific Theater of Operations, which we're flipping right now. So I think I'm waiting on I hope I registered it with Decision for the erratic counters. I'm not really sure. All right. So the other, so we'll do the Kickstarter first. You have 63 hours, so only a day or two to get in on the Rock of Chickamauga Kickstarter from Herman Lettman. And I'll put a link to this in the chat as well. Herman and Mark Walker over at Flying Pig Games. This is the follow-up to A Most Fearful Sacrifice on, obviously, Chickamauga. I personally am quite excited about this. So, and it's going to be just friggin' enormous, as shouldn't surprise anybody. Most of these big box games are, in fact, enormous. Aaron Dennis is going to be at Foxconn on Friday. We'll get to that in a minute here, because there's actually... Brant will tell you there's more, and he's right, but the 3 big tabletop board wargaming conventions that are coming this weekend are Compass Expo in Meriden, Connecticut, Foxconn in Dallas, and SD Hist in San Diego. So if the world's your oyster this weekend, pretty much. So, and Storm of Steel. If I didn't mention Storm of Steel, yeah, that is here as well. And I have reacquired the 2nd edition, whatever we're calling it. I don't think it's a 2nd edition. It just, the expansion is included. And that expansion is very hard to get on its own. As I searched for it for years before finally dumping the thing because I didn't have the expansion. And you do want it, I think. You can get most of the material, just download it, but there's counters in there, and I think you want those. So Storm of Steel is a pretty interesting, pretty promising looking game. Not a bad idea to try and run that at Winterfest this year. We're still talking about exactly what we're doing there. All right, that is all the visual aids that we have. So... however, there is another sale which will be starting just after midnight on Thursday morning. That is Multiman Publishing's annual sale. They have not yet announced what is going to be in it yet. So I'm going to pull the visual aid up once again and tell you what my guess is that will be in it, because this stuff tends to be there almost every year. And of course, here's the fund for Dean and Dean's family and grandchildren. So offhand, I can't go through this whole website, but what I do expect to see on sale is OCS Korea. And if you're on the fence on OCS Korea is a pretty good introduction to OCS. So I would check that out. There'll probably be some ASL action packs and stuff and all that stuff. Apparently, I mean, plus one of them's in the middle of the country, one of them's to the left, and one of them's to the right. So, I mean, you're kind of covered wherever you're at, right? So, and as Brant will point out, and you can go check out the convention calendar on the Armchair Dragoon site if you want, there's actually more than that happening this weekend. Those are just the 3 things that are on my radar, because what I pay attention to. So, what do we got here? This is a 2? Yeah, okay. We got, looks like 4 different kinds of infantry here, so it's all good. They're just factors, though. It's not a big deal. So let's pull this down again. That's going to start on Thursday, just after midnight. So check that out when MMP does put it on sale. Chances are pretty good there'll be some TCS on sale, and if I personally grab anything, it might be TCS Ariete, which is inexpensive and I don't have. So, very nice. Very nice. Luzon is extremely digestible. That's the other place I'd recommend people start at this point. it isn't really going to give you a full picture of what playing OCS all the time is like, because it's so small and the rest of the games are not. Plus, there's a bunch of rules things like some of the supply aspects and things like that that will not come up in Luzon, and it's a quick game. Experience, I think it took Fucko and I like 2 hours, but that was with a lot of Heaven and Han, the whole campaign. So Vicky will be at Compass Expo, so awesome. So hopefully as many people as possible will get to conventions at some point. Except, of course, Dan, who doesn't want to go to any conventions, because he wants to go to conventions. He says he does, but then he never actually goes. Oh, sweet. Oh, that's awesome. Fantastic. I mean, I assume this is for the SD HistCon. If so, I would love to meet Eric Lee Smith in person. That would be fantastic. So the legendary Eric Lee Smith, a wargame designer who I think is underappreciated. Let me put it that way. That sounds weird considering that there's some legendary games designed by him, but Eric Lee Smith was extraordinarily influential. So we should not forget that. In any case, what other news do I have? All right, so we got that. We had a big windstorm. Another tree fell down. It hit the fence and miraculously did not flatten it. It's not a big tree. And missed the shed that has been hit by 2 previous falling trees by about a foot. So it's one of these dead pine trees. It's actually the neighbor's tree, but fell on our property, so I'm going to get rid of it. Randy Maldon will be at Foxconn. Chris Yap will be at, cool. I've been delighted to hear any announcement that Eric Lee Smith may have. Let me put it that way. That's fantastic, Mike. Very good. So Adepticon is moving to Milwaukee next year. Where is it now? No kidding. I haven't even torn the thing down yet. It's like this destroyed wreck of a shed. This shed is dead already. The first tree killed the shed. I've just been lazy and haven't had both the energy and the proper tools to take it apart, which basically comes down to the power drill and a sawzall. All right. So it's in Chicago right now. I don't think I am. I need to take a look at this because this is from, I just found out about this like an hour ago. This is apparently a new edition of Elysia from Avalon Hill coming out through Worthington. So this is worth keeping an eye on, but I did not have the time because I literally just saw it on Facebook like an hour ago. I did not, I think so. There'll be tons and tons of people there. So we'll hopefully get some, we'll get some video. Let me put it that way. So in any case, all right. So what else do we got? All right. So a secret thing has arrived, and I'll tell you about it because it's going to lead into the next thing. Stellar Horizons 2 from Compass Games. They were kind enough to send me one of the preliminary copies, and I am impressed with what I see so far. I just finished clipping it today. It is partially pre-rounded, but not every counter is pre-rounded. So when clipping the non-pre-rounded counters, the counters are pretty thick. So I was using the deluxe clipper with the dice glued in the handle and everything. It's toast. So the dice trick, I think, is useful, but don't think that this is going to completely prevent any possibility of these things breaking. This broke. This is the second one of these that I've broke. I broke my 2mm years ago and would have been using this thing. But because of the slot, it's got that little, I don't know if you can see that or not. It's got this little slot that you can put the counters in, this thing up at the top. And the counters they fit pretty snugly because those counters are so thick. So this accommodates a little bigger counters. That's why I was using this. It broke. So I'm not buying another one of these. I will eventually either make a new handle for this, or alternatively, I will take this handle out, throw it in the trash, and take out my handle from the 3mm clipper, which I hardly ever use, and put that in there, because I do use that one from time to time. So, yes. Is this on Kickstarter already? I know this is coming. There's another Labatai small Labatai game coming in against the Odds magazine. I will 100% buy this. but I didn't. I didn't. If this is political as we get tonight, great. Let's not. So I'll have to look at this. I'm aware of this. I'm not sure I was aware that it is actually running right now. So we'll have to investigate that. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of fixes for it, and sometimes the fixes work and sometimes they don't. If I do fix it by making a handle for it, which is possible, then I may well just do a video on what I did. So anyway, well, I think I could theoretically print a 3D print a handle for it. I would really want to use ABS plastic for that, and I don't print in ABS plastic. So no, I'll do it myself. But if you have any more scraps of that wood, I will take one. Because that's like the perfect wood thickness for that particular task. So in any case. All right. So if you've got the box, it'll say like S3 or R2.5, R2 or R3. That is the radius in millimeters. I am not really aware of any markings on the clippers themselves to tell you what the size is, which is why on my, I've got 3 of these. That's why I numbered them. So number 2 is 2 millimeter, obviously. These are half-inch counters. I prefer a tight clip. So in any case. All right. So bearing that in mind, there will be a video. It's not an unboxing video. It's a first look video, which some of you may have already seen. Because I did release it in a limited way to patrons and people on the Discord server and to a couple other people because Compass asked. So I said, sure, here's the link. So I will manually flip it live on Wednesday. So check that out. And the game looks pretty promising. So I'm excited to play it. I'm already working on getting people over here to play it 2 weeks after SD Hist. So in any case, yeah, I wonder what gave that away. How about that? I would prefer a tight clip. I mean, I don't see any sense in making the counters round, right? I just want to make them look attractive and easier to handle. In any case, what else do I have? Do I have anything else? Got the tree, got Still Horizons 2, got the busted clipper, and tomorrow is election day here in the United States. Go vote. That is it for politics. No more politics tonight. So, John Stanley, thank you so much. 2024 is the year of the Battle of Cowpens. Vivictus has a game out and GMTS 1 on P500. I'm not sure that's going to make it in 2024. In fact, I'm positive the GMT game is not going to make it in 2024, but it might be 2025. So thank you, Danny. I much appreciated. And John, thank you for the support, as it is, as usual, appreciated. So what else do I got? I want to get some more stuff edited in the next couple of days so that I have content for next week, because we're not doing any live shows, and I'd rather not have a week completely barren of content. But I don't intend to work on content while I'm away. Let me put it that, or at least the editing part of it, right? I mean, I'll make some video, but generally the making of the video is not, I don't find stressful at all. The editing I do find stressful because I'm not particularly good at it. So anybody that voted already, you're smarter than me. I got to go in the morning. So that is inconvenient, but it is what it is. We're not going to not vote. So, all right. So all right. So Mike Reed says that the Oregon Deluxe 2 millimeters given him the best overall results. Oh God. Yeah. I've seen some really abominable, counter clipping done with nail clippers on a lot of games, including but not limited to ASL. You can clip tidily with nail clippers, but it's very difficult to stay completely consistent, right? And that's the great thing about these. William Aaron says that against the odds, Vauchamp games being produced for Turning Point Simulations box game series rather than, oh, that's cool news. I've got that already, though. I don't need another one. Unless there's going to be substantial revision, and I don't see any particular need for that. I haven't even picked up the new WAV yet because I got the old one. So I'll probably get it whenever they do the new ILAW. I don't have that, so I'll pick that up. We'll see what the bandwidth situation looks like. This is all about bandwidth when it comes to doing stuff like this. I've done it before and it's worked fine. I've done it before and it's been complete trash. So but I've never been to this event before. So it's California. Maybe they got magical California corn-fed internet or whatever it is. Who knows? In any case, I wouldn't say that, but I don't like the look that fingernail clippers give. I like a rounder corner. I think is aesthetically more pleasing. And again, the consistency with the organ laminations tools. And again, I don't expect this actually. The last, so La Bataille de Vauchamp, which is the previous La Bataille game that appeared in Against the Odds, was organized, at least, by the folks at Marshall Enterprises. And I think their new La Bataille game is out or about to be. And that is Ekmol, which is a really important battle that there's not very many games on for some reason. I would agree with this. This is my expectation. So I don't expect to be able to go live. We'll see what happens, but don't count on it. I'm also not taking the entire portable studio with me, so bear that in mind, because I'm not putting it on an airplane. So in any case, I'm reasonably happy with these as well. I do need to pick up the Italian campaign set, though. Hopefully that'll happen soon, but probably not in the next month and a half. We will see. I mean, I've certainly done this too. You never know when you're just going to get too much. Maybe somebody with like really good dexterity can make it consistent, but I can't. So in any case, on the La Bataille de Vauchamp, it's just, you just use there's rules in there and it's kind of a stripped down version of the Premier rules, but it's the Premier rules. So it is my expectation that what we will see in whatever the new one is, Culm, is just that same rule set with a couple of game specific rules. So I have seen this as well. There's also the C4 corner rounder or counter clip cutter or whatever it's called, which I refer to as the C4 counter mutilator. The problem that I've observed personally I've never owned one and I've never used it. I do, however, have a buddy that has one. And you can definitely see that over time, the plastic wears away because you're cutting a metal blade along a plastic guide, and it's going to wear down unless you're better at it than everybody else. And I could think of ways to prevent that from happening, but you're still going to end up with big stop sign looking counters after a while. So in any case, yeah, I would assume not. Most hotels do not have great Wi-Fi. I managed to get it done at Winterfest, but there's only like 30 people in the room. So, and they're all old guys and they're not on the phone all the time hogging the internet. So, but we're at a new hotel this year, so we'll see what happens. Excellent. All right. So I do have one more thing to do before we get to the topic, and we're doing great on time, and that is the Noble Knight campaign. So there is a Noble Knight affiliate link in the video description, and if you are going to buy stuff from Noble Knight, use my affiliate link, and I get a little bit of a kickback in the form of store credit. We have done a number of campaigns now to buy things that I would not feel comfortable paying cash for, but for which this is perfect. The latest of which is Advanced European Theater of Operations, which arrived late last week. This is the companion game to the Pacific game that I'm clipping tonight, and it is very hard to get. I did get the expansion as well before anybody asks, and the expansion is easy to get, but because that was like $30. But the game itself is pretty hard to get. I've been lurking on eBay. I got an eBay search running on this thing, and I've had one for years. But unfortunately, they don't come up for prices I want to pay. So I want to thank everybody that has helped contribute. This went way faster than I thought. I thought it was going to be another month or two, and I was able to push the button early last week. So this is, let's see here. Yeah, the SD HistCon is not at a hotel, but there are like a bunch of hotels in the area. So if I was 3D printing this, I would want to use ABS filament, which is stronger than the stuff I use. It is difficult to print, and you probably need an enclosure, or there are problems with ABS. But it's basically Lego plastic. It's the same basic type of plastic. It is, if you want to print like stuff that you need to be really durable, ABS is the stuff to use. There's TPS, which is the stuff that you would use if you want it to be flexible or squishy. So all kinds of things. All right. So, This is possible, but I'm not doing this. There's no way. Scott Rowland says you can pretty much, as I think I've demonstrated over the course of the last 4 years doing this show, you can 100% pretty much do this without paying any attention to it at all. And I do. So that does mean that every once in a great while, and I have done it on the air, I misclip a counter because I'm using the regular one and not the deluxe. But it happens so infrequently. I would estimate that it happens 1 in every roughly 5 to 10,000 counters for me because I've been using this thing for years. So it doesn't really come up that often. I have seen, so Fucko at one point used scissors to clip his counters, and I was pretty surprised by they didn't look nearly as bad as I would expect, having been told that. So you can get good results with scissors, but in general, that's going to be like very tiring on the hands. I think more so than this thing. So there's that. All right. So this is also true. Mike Reed says that you really do need the counters really do need to be pretty close to perfectly square to get a good clip, especially with this particular device. And Avalon Hill was not the greatest at that. For that matter, SPI wasn't either. But generally, it's fine. I don't have a lot of problems with that. I have other issues. Is that a 4? That is a 4. I didn't know there were any 4s. I generally have not had issues with either Avalon Hill or SPI games in there. If anything, with SPI counters, something I've noticed that, and I think this is just due to age, because it doesn't happen in every SPI game that I clip. There's where sometimes the clip won't be clean, where like on these, it's perfectly clean. And in fact, these don't have center nibs or anything. These are, other than being slightly misregistered, but not ruinously so. These are good counters. Little thin by modern standards, but the game's like 15 years old, so I don't really mind too much. But yeah, you do want the counters to be actually square. And that's even more important with the standard clipper versus the deluxe clipper. The deluxe clipper's quite a bit more forgiving. You really can't misclip on it. You can clip not enough, but then you just run that corner through it again and it takes off whatever you left. If you do that with this, you might clip a little bit of the side off the counter. And if you do it exceptionally badly, you can tell by looking at it. So in any case, all right, so this works. Hey, if the lizard is well trained, why not? All right, so William Aarons mentions the ATO Labatai game. It's Culm, which is in 1813. And it's so it's not going to be in the magazine. Is that what I'm hearing here? Because I haven't looked at this yet. Like I said, I didn't know it was live already. I've done this too. I was actually using the 2.5 for the half-inch counters and the 3 for the vehicles. The 2.5 looks fine on the half-inch counters. The 3's my 3 is a little bit big, even for the 5/8 inch counters, I think. I don't normally, even on 5/8 inch counters, I will normally use 2.5 and not 3mm. All right. And Gulf Strike Victory Games, remember, they're an imprint of Avalon Hill, so they had a lot of the same types of issues. Although, and, if Mark Herman's here, maybe he can weigh in on this. I don't feel like the materials were the same materials for Victory Games as they were for Avalon Hill. I feel like the counters felt a little different, but I could be nuts too. I haven't done a side-by-side on this or anything. So maybe that's just like a memory of mine from the 90s or something. All right, very good. Okay, so Labatai de Culm will be in the magazine. Vauchamp will be in the box per Perry Spropoulos. Thank you very much for that update. So Matt Taylor, thanks for stopping by. Good to see you. Red Strike counters. Ugh. Now, this I hate, right? Is counters that are pre-rounded, but were those pre-rounded? Because they might not have been. Not all of VUCA's stuff is pre-rounded. Was it? Okay. I mean, this was what I thought for years. And then, handling a couple of these, I'm like, did they really? I don't know. They don't quite feel the same. But then again, I haven't handled a lot of Avalon Hill stuff in the past year or two. So in any case, I've handled quite a lot of SPI stuff. So, all right. So what I got cooking. Let's keep these correctly sorted here. So what I've got cooking here is what are we doing on time? Okay, we're not message from Noble Knight ready yet. All right, so I'm going to get into tonight's topic. So language of wargaming, and I'm going to explain this right now. So I signed up for one of those 3 months for $1.99 a month or whatever it is for Audible, right? And mostly that's going into like the fantasy stuff, but I'm not really listening to any of the fantasy stuff using that. So if you are an Audible member at the $15 a month level, which is like the regular Audible membership, you get an audiobook credit a month, which you can use on whatever audiobook you want, even like the ridiculously expensive ones. But you also get discounts on audiobooks, substantial discounts in some cases. And I'm not talking sales for Audible members. I'm talking like the regular everyday prices are lower. You can also buy the credits. And you can listen to, just because you're a member, you can listen to a bunch of stuff in the Audible library. Now there's a lower there is a lower level of Audible membership that just gives you access to the library and not the credits. It may or may not give you the discount. I'm not sure because I didn't buy any audiobooks at the time. But so I'm listening to How Languages Change by John McWhorter, which is from the Great Courses Plus. Actually, there's quite a bit of Great Courses Plus content available, and as long as you don't need to see it, which is fine in this case. And this got me thinking about, and it's a linguistics thing, right? It's specifically about language change, but it's generally about linguistics. So this has gotten me thinking about in terms of how terminology gets established in wargaming and how we continue to use terminology, which in some cases might be giving us a false impression or at least a false sense of precision. So an example might be that we call the points that you have to shuffle around the map in OCS supply points. Okay. But is that really what those points represent? And I think, if we were talking to Dean, he would say, well, yeah, but they really represent more of a limitation on logistics and command control and a lot of other things, without being a quantitative representation of beans and bullets, right? Whereas in something like Campaign for North Africa, supply represents supply, but you actually separately keep track of fuel and other types of supply, among many other things that required you to... I actually... having listened to this, I'm thinking about, I think there's one other one that's like an Audible membership thing that you can just listen to. But I'm thinking about one of his other ones. We'll see. I'm keeping a credit in the hole just in case I need something. So, and if I'm not really, I don't want to spend a lot of time on the books I'm reading because I don't think this show is about that. And there's another channel for that, which I haven't been incredibly up to date on lately because I've finished like 4 books and I haven't done anything new over there. Well, this is true, but I think a more accurate way to say it might be that Dean had a different and maybe a little more flexible idea of what a zone of control was supposed to represent. Because OCS, for example, has zones of control. They're not like hard zones of control, like you might have seen in a lot of, but not all, SPI games, for example. And really, zones of control only really affect truck movement and retreats. And retreats only in the case of you are already disorganized prior to the retreat. So this is just an example. There are, I think, probably other examples that we can find that where the term we use as wargaming hobbyists, because we all have this sort of mental dictionary of what a lot of these terms mean, like zones of control and things like that. There have to be other things that are misleading us as well. Very likely, more because, so 2 reasons. One, it looks terrible. And the more it grows, the worse it looks. So we are right now at roughly 2 weeks past where it looks at its best. Let me put it that way. The other reason is it's really quite annoying. So I do, brush it and stuff, but it's a hassle to take care of. And I actually was eating some food and got some food stuck in it the other day, and it was very embarrassing, and I'd rather not. So I'm keeping it for the trip, and it's probably getting shaved not too much longer after that. So Dustin Mitchell says, Wargames often use precise language to describe game mechanics that are abstract representations of reality. So here's the thing. Unless you are trying to build some kind of quantitative simulation, which is something that is very, very rare in board wargaming. It's a little less rare in computer wargames, but many of the computer wargames that would qualify as having been designed this way are professional simulations designed for the military or some think tank or something like that. Board wargames, all the mechanics are abstract, and abstract is actually another one of these words. What do we even mean by that, right? I mean, we mean that it doesn't feel quantitative to us, right? But to some extent, at least, that applies to all wargaming mechanics, right? So, plainclothes, I do have a hat that would fit. I will tell you that. Yeah, there's very few games that completely ignore the idea behind zones of control. There's even in game systems that where Gauss is an example of this. There are no zones of control in Gauss, okay? But what you have instead are artillery stops, which basically mean that if you move into a hex, that an enemy artillery unit can barrage, you have to stop. And of course it's Gauss, so it's quite a lot more complicated than that, but that is the sense of it. And Gauss also has some limitations on movement just based on adjacency as well. So now this is I am not sick. It's just like a frog in my throat here. So since Dean has been brought up at least twice since we started this conversation 2 minutes ago, I'm going to hypothesize that this might be, because Dean would use the actual terminology in many cases, but sometimes there is no actual terminology that represents what he's trying to do mechanically. And I think that I've sometimes said that Dean had a propensity for these sort of outside the box pieces of terminology inside the game. Things like hip shoots and the snafu roll, at least. I don't think we can reasonably say that represents the historical usage of the word snafu. But certainly it gives the sense of what's going on. And that mechanic needed to be called something, right? So it could have just called it an activation roll, right? But maybe this is one of the reasons, and unfortunately, we can't ask Dean this anymore. But this might have been one of the reasons why Dean tended to use unusual terminology some of the time. So, yeah, I'm just, I feel 100% fine. I just have a little bit of frogginess. You know what I need is some whiskey, actually. Good stuff. Very fruity, this stuff. Now, see, cowardly legs is basically a shaken status, okay? That is used in the Line of Battle series. And Jeff Taylor mentions it as well here. It's cowardly legs, but of course, Jeff knows that. And this is actually taken, that's what it represents, right? Is what most wargame designers would just call shaken or disorganized or something like that. It represents a degradation of the combat efficiency of a unit, or possibly that it is more susceptible to breaking. Okay. In line of battle, this is called cowardly legs. And there's a reason why Dean called it that, because it's from one of Abraham Lincoln's speeches, as I recall. So it wasn't used on the battlefield as far as I could tell, but something to the effect that if a man's legs would be cowardly, then something, something, something. So, ooh, nice. Mike Reed is drinking Green River Bottled in Bond. I'm not a big Bottled in Bond guy, but I haven't experimented with it or not. So, well, I'll disagree on the graphics, but this is a bit more of a nuanced point, and not the topic tonight anyway. So, in any case, I won't say that sometimes the terminology does not get awkward. It totally does. But I don't think that hopefully we didn't just kill the chat. That would be nice if we didn't. Hopefully it's still working. Dustin Mitchell says, might be units that are eliminated. So this is true, right? This is one of those realities of the actual campaigns. Very seldom is a unit annihilated to a man, right? And I think we all kind of know this, that removing the unit from the map doesn't necessarily represent being annihilated to a man. It represents the fact that a unit has lost all combat capability due to whatever losses or morale or what have you. So, but as Dustin points out here, just saying rendered combat ineffective is quite awkward, right? So there are some games. GVACW has it, like a brigade and a division ineffective status. If like you break so many units or take so many manpower losses inside a brigade or division, that brigade or division becomes combat ineffective, and there's a status for that. John Stanley mentions the use of Latin in law and science is intentional. It's a fixed language, not a developing language. So I have thoughts about this. Thank you, John Stanley. Having taken both Latin and some linguistics material, Latin continues to evolve pretty much through the Middle Ages. It doesn't really happen until the 16th, 17th, 18th century, something like that, where Latin ossifies to that degree. As a liturgical language, as a church language, Latin does continue to evolve, and that's why ecclesiastical Latin sounds different than classical Latin did. There is different terminology. There is different pronunciation. Classical Latin, which can, to some extent, its pronunciation can be reconstructed because, like, people talked about it. But, oh, thank you. Very nice. I appreciate that. I will take a look at that. Thank you, Aaron Dennis. So but back to this. So, but in terms of Latin getting used in things like law and science, this is one of the reasons why, other than just, it's the perfect language, so we gotta, use that instead of these degenerate modern languages, which is nonsense. There's no such thing as a degenerate language. And as McWhorter points out very, succinctly, and other people have said something like this too, the natural state of a language is to change, right? Language changes. There are even neologisms that have been created in Latin. Latin is an interesting language in that, and it's hard to see this without studying it, or at least being able to compare it with ancient Greek, say. The vocabulary of Latin seems really, really limited compared to Greek, right? That's one reason why the Romans used a lot of Greek words. And a lot of times you can tell what the Greek words are. If it's a Latin word that has the PH in it, for example, it almost certainly came from Greek. So if Liz Davidson's watching, she's probably shaking her head thinking, listen to this idiot talking. Because she actually knows what she's doing. I am a clown. But this is one of the reasons that I think Latin is, for example, still used in law, at least, and don't, of course, overlook the truism that a lot of our legal principles are derived from Roman law, right? And that is another reason why that is the same thing. So this is another thing that, all right, skedaddle. There is a skedaddle too, actually. There's absolutely a period term, and Line of Battle uses this as well. So, I got used to Cowardly Legs and skedaddle. Skedaddle is more of a, as I recall, more of a intentional retreat than a rout, but something like that. So, as you can tell, yes, we are still all thinking about the Roman Empire basically on a daily basis. I don't want to say every day, but it's pretty close to every day. Anyway, so all right, Perfidious Albion and mentions the Romans adopting the Greek gods, and this is also, it's kind of true, but it's also kind of misleading because what the Roman religion was fundamentally very different from Greek religion. The Greek gods there's Mount Olympus, there's 12 Olympians and some other gods up there, and they're gods, and they're just really powerful men and women, that basically function just like people, but they have divine powers. The Roman idea of what a god was very different from that. It was kind of weird and a little bit new agey and very spiritual, in a way that the Greek religion was not. There would be, for example, the house gods, right? And they didn't differentiate this between these little statues. You see them in Gladiator, right? Like Maximus has the house gods, and they're like these little statuettes. They actually did stuff like that, and there wasn't like a distinction between those gods and Jupiter. Jupiter was just in charge, right? So, and I mentioned this already. So Brant will be filling in, Brant and whoever from the Armchair Dragoons, and I'll probably pop in, will be filling in for me on next Monday at 8 p.m. So check that out if you are interested. So, in any case, I haven't looked at Brothers at War, but the term skedaddle is also used in Line of Battle as well, as I recall. So, and Danny Zachary says the Roman Empire just became the Catholic Church. I think this is a witticism that does have a decent amount of accuracy to it, but I'd hate anybody to take this statement at face value. Let me put it that way. So there's some truth to this too, because remember the stories you'd hear about the gods, you'd go hear the poet talk and tell the story of the Iliad or the Aeneid or whatever it is, right? So I have not looked at I do have Lion of the North. I did pick it up because it was like the only GBOH game I didn't have, and at that point I might as well get it, right? So I did pick it up. But I really haven't looked at it, so I can't really comment on this. But this wouldn't shock me. Oh my goodness, my wife has insisted, and she got what she wanted, that I procure Weird Al Yankovic tickets. And Weird Al will be here in this general area, like I don't know, like next August or something like that. It's like almost a year away. So. Eating off the map is another one, actually, because that is like, there's like no, you could see how Dean derived the term, right? Because it's kind of obvious how Dean must have derived the term. Did we get, oh, Jesus Christ. Anyway, we've got more infantry here that we've got to sort through. Oh, some of this is cavalry, actually. Well, we'll figure it out. Anyway, eating off the map is another one. I mean, you can see how that term emerged inside of OCS, but it doesn't represent anything historically, right? You're just, it's a thing put in to make the game work. And if you were to have a conversation with the OCS, there we go. If you were to have a conversation with the OCS development team, they'll tell you that, supply is a thing that we tweak at the end to make sure that the game works right, rather than being a quantitative assessment of how many beans and bullets are available to the army. So, what are we doing here? I am using a GMT counter trace for this because I've got a ton of them, and I can get this entire game into 3 of them. So, I of course, everybody likes Weird Al. I'm not. My wife is a huge Weird Al fan. However, I am not a huge Weird Al fan. I like Weird Al, and will be happy to go with her. But beyond that, who knows? All right, so, okay, so we got some stuff here. We've got HUN644 New mentions that skedaddle is used in Blind Swords and Black Swan. I should remember that, but I may have just only be remembering it from that. Tickets to Taylor Swift. Good for anybody that wants to do that. Good for them. I hope they enjoy it. Eric from Eric's Table Napoleonic Battles is here. Eric, thanks for stopping by. Lutzen is the better scenario than Breitenfeld in Land of the North from a long ago. This might make sense given the battles, but I don't know much about the either of the battles that's in that game. So there's a lot of times there'll be I mean this is in GCACW, for example, where there's like a scavenge foraging rule where you can how are we doing? Where you can forage if you need supply and don't have supply. But maybe it is the whiskey, actually. Or I could just be dehydrated. That's plausible. And that represents the kind of thing that we mean when we say you're eating off the map, right? Except that for, in OCS, for example, you are still consuming supply. Some OCS games do have some kind of extra rule that kind of gives you extra ability to eat off the map. The tree bark soup rule from, I forget which game that's in, but it's in one of the OCS games. And a lot of the OCS games have something like that in them, but this is what they are. Those rules are representing is basically foraging and scavenging, and probably also some degree of taking what you needed from local civilians. That's okay. It's good. Basic resource points. So yeah, I mean, this is a pretty abstract mechanic, right? You're boiling down all of a country's resources into this set of points. And there is a huge degree of abstraction in doing that. And I don't know that I've ever heard anybody complain about that level of that abstraction, but it is an abstraction, right? You're taking, steel and rubber and gasoline and all these other things and just randomly, arbitrarily saying they are all part of the basic resource points. And then that kind of runs the entire game for the most part. So, the ghost trains in, I don't know about SCS Corellia, which is not a game I've looked at, but the ghost trains really just represent a disrupted line of supply and or communication, though. That the trains are not a unit in BCS. They are abstract. They are saying that basically what they're saying is, here's the headquarters, and the headquarters has a line of supply and communication stretching back to wherever it goes to, all right? And the placement of the trains represent the road network that you are using to delineate on the map where those trains are going, which then gives the enemy an opportunity to disrupt those lines of supply and communication. So they are not a combat unit in the game system, but that's less important than saying they don't represent a combat unit at all, or even anything necessarily discrete. They are saying this is where your line of supply and communication is, right? You're designating that when you place the train, and your trains are ghosted when your supply line and communication line is somehow disrupted, or when you move it, because now suddenly you've just moved it because you just activated. So your supply is potentially at least disrupted, and whether it's an actual disruption or not depends on what you rolled. Maybe it will be an actual disruption, and that will be the deciding factor on your snafu check, or maybe it won't. So, okay, yeah, to some extent it is, right? It is the balancing mechanism in the game, is the supply meter, right? And bear in mind also that everybody, you are expected, when playing OCS, to whine about you don't have enough supply. It's traditional. So, yeah, this is the one at Blossom. So there we go. I know somebody that went to, I don't forget whether it was New Kids on the Block or New Edition or whatever. I don't know. I don't pay enough attention to that. This was years ago anyway. So anyway, this is exactly right. I'm actually trying to be very, very deliberate about buying games at this point. Which doesn't mean I'm not buying games. It just means that I'm trying to be more deliberate, because I kind of feel like I've got too much now, to be completely honest. I don't know that means there's going to be any kind of large-scale purge anytime soon. But that said, I have purchased, for example, a number of... Now, none of this was expensive, right? So it's not like I went and spent $200 on Highway or Spires of the Kremlin, right? Which would be absurd. But I did pay... Actually, I think I got it at and a pay it forward, but a variety of 3W games that might have cost $5 or $10 a piece. I could probably dump those, to be completely honest. So there might be some trimming at some point. I'm reluctant to do that at this time. What scared me off of concerts, I don't want to say scared, but basically stopped me from going to concerts for years, is that I was going to see Neil Young was basically touring every year, and he'd come to the Northeast Ohio and play at Blossom or the Cleveland Music Hall or whatever, and I would go. And then there was, I want to say it was a Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young reunion, and it was at the what was at the time the CSU Convocation Center, and tickets were like $300, and I was like, no. And this was like 25 years ago. I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. No. And I haven't really seriously tried to go to a concert since then. I did have tickets for Acid Mother's Temple. That whole show got canceled due to the pandemic. So I tried one time, and that wasn't expensive. Those were like $30 tickets. That's cool, but it's Acid Mother's Temple, right? I mean, this is not Taylor Swift. So, there you go. So cool. Yeah, well, he's not getting up here till like next August or something like that. So there you go. Well, I mean, this is true of virtually every conflict that's ever been fought, to be completely honest. So, rolling for forced march. So this is another thing that is often not reflected. This is, I feel like this is more of a factor in pre-20th century stuff. It's a huge factor in American Civil War and in Napoleonics is attrition, and most game systems ignore it. War and Peace didn't, and the Kevin Zucker Campaigns of Napoleon does not. In fact, that's one of the reasons I'm interested in that system, is that it does get kind of runs off of attrition, right? You've got command points, but once you're out of command points and you never have enough, you're going to have to start rolling, and that's what you're rolling for, pretty much. So, and many doctors, it's all abstraction. That's right. I feel like Empires in Arms is a game that I definitely want to play, but I also feel like you really need the 6 people. 6 or 7 people, or whatever the maximum number is, maybe -1. I think you can get away with not having Turkey being played by a player, for example, but everybody else, you really need a player. So that makes Empires in Arms difficult to arrange, but a lot of those challenges are mitigated by the internet and Vassal and things like that. I've heard non-great things about the Vassal module for Empires in Arms, by the way. So, all right. So, ghost units in Karelia are just expressions of unit influence on fortified lines. I'd have to see this to make much sense out of what is being described here, I think. Professor Albion says, when the evil mustache man shifted his focus from Moscow and focused the following year on the Caucasus, he wanted Russian oil, but Russian oil was not as easy to refine or use as Romanian oil. So there are, as I hope everybody knows in today's economic environment, there's good oil and bad oil, in the sense that there is oil that's really easy to refine and burns relatively cleanly, or at least less dirty, and bad oil that's hard to refine, results in crappier products. And we never use crude. We don't use crude oil for anything, as far as I'm aware. It's always refined to some extent. And a lot of the petrochemicals that we use, things like kerosene and stuff like that, are in some cases just byproducts. But natural gas was a byproduct of petroleum production for a long time. And now we're tapping natural gas for its own sake. And that's been the case for a long time. So this is true. But relatively few, not none, but relatively few computer war games actually leverage the computer's capabilities in this way. That is something that I could get a show topic out of. No, let me rephrase that. Somebody who plays more computer war games than I do could easily do a lot of material on this topic. I don't play very many of them, and a lot of it is this exact reason. So, I mean, this is, sure, you could, but it's a quantification of a bunch of different things that are way more complicated, and that John Prados wisely decided we are not going to track individual different types of resources like iron ore and rubber and petroleum and all that other stuff, because that would be a giant pain in the ass. So we just have one big index, but it's an abstraction, right? This is not a criticism of the mechanic. Not that I think Craig is taking it this way, just to say this for the sake of clarity. This is not a criticism of that mechanic. It's pointing out that they're all abstractions. All the mechanics are abstractions. And sometimes they're good abstractions and effective abstractions, and sometimes they're not. So, all right. I am officially, Jeff Anderson, thanks for stopping by. I am officially behind on the chat. So let me attempt to get caught up while we hear from our good friends at Noble Knight Games, the official sponsors of the Counterclipping Show. So take it away, Noble Knight.
Here at Noble Knight Games, we've been carefully growing the world's largest selection of board games, role-playing games and dice, war games, miniatures and paints, card games, and more. Going on 25 years now. Our rustic castle contains more game and hobby goodness than you can shake a stick at. Complete with careful packaging and the finest customer service the land can provide. You can buy, sell, trade from anywhere in the world, just like nature intended. Noble Knight Games.
All right, once again, thank you, Noble Knight, for being the official sponsor of the Counterclipping Show. So Mike Reed says that there's a lot of norm busting in BCS rules, which is absolutely accurate. I've said before, and I still feel like this, that we, the nominally experienced wargamers, had more trouble with BCS, learning BCS, than the new fella did, because we were all hung up on the way things usually work, and BCS doesn't work like that in a lot of cases. Royce is saying, making a wine cellar analogy here, which of course is quite true. You know, you got finite amount of time, right? So I'm not here, and I'm not sure I'll get to where Perry Sporopoulos is at here, but I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff coming out. I just put in a GMT, this was like a month ago now, but I just put in a GMT order for a huge pile of stuff. So, did they bill for Mark Herman's book? I heard they were going to, and then they didn't, and I'm not sure what's going on. So, Steps is the, Sean Lambert, thanks for stopping by the way. I got several of your videos in my watch later list that I need to get to. And folks, Sean has a YouTube channel that you should check out. He's got some very interesting content in there. This is a term that I think I didn't hear until about 1990 or so. And I think that's just because it was not a term that tended to pop up very often in Avalon Hills games. In other games, the term certainly predates my exposure to it, right? So to me, it was the whole steps idea was a little weird at first, but it was intuitive, right? DJ Flippy's having problems with the last Gamble conference. I haven't clipped mine yet, so maybe I should hit that next and try to determine if I'm having a problem too, so I could call Bill and yell at him about it if I am. I am positive that if you are having any kind of problem with them, that you can reach out to Compass and they will send you replacements. They are very good about this. The untried units. This is another abstraction, right? Surely the Soviets had some idea what the combat capabilities of their units were, even if it was just looking at a TO&E in those cases where the TO&E on the paper tended to be accurate, which it was often not. But then you get them into actual combat and they perform under expectations, as I think they did a lot in 1941, which is, of course, when Panzer Group Guderian, which is the PGG that Drew is referring to here, when that is set, which is July or August or September of 1941. I forget exactly where that falls because I still haven't played this. It is on the list of things to do. I have played OCS Smolensk several times, and that is July through September of 1941. So Perfidious Albion mentions that part of the reason why concert tickets cost so much is due to the extremely limited revenue the artists make from streaming. Streaming royalties are really low. However, another part of this is companies like the ticket aggregators that will just go and buy all the tickets and then quadruple the prices and resell them to the public, right? It is essentially legalized scalping. So that is a significant factor too. And I will mention that the Weird Al tickets were expensive. They were not inexpensive. That's what you mean. Okay, I get that. You'll see it in the video where I'm like pulling parts out of the box for Stellar Horizons 2, and the one huge counter sheet with the ships on them just disintegrates in my hands. I pick it up. It's off camera, unfortunately, but you'll see the detritus of this. I pick it up, and every counter on the sheet falls out instantly. It was hilarious. So yeah, whoever's doing their die cutting, man, they're keeping those die. Apparently the die cutting is done by samurai over at Compass, as far as I could tell. It's possible that the Empires at Arms Vassal module is better now, or that there's a fan-made module that is better. I don't know. I haven't looked at it in a while. There is functionally no attrition in Europe. This is not really true. But you're only really suffering attrition if you have units isolated for it's something like a month or two. It's 2 or 4 turns or something like that. And that feels weird, to be completely honest. And I having not played Fire in the East, I wonder how that works on the East Front, where you had historically some significant encirclements of Soviet forces, and they just all either disintegrated and fled or surrendered, and that didn't go well for them. But I wonder how that works in Fire in the East. Somebody will probably tell me here. So, well, yeah, I mean, they thought the war was going to be over super quick. So, and in France it was, and in Poland it was, but then they went and were idiots and invaded the Soviet Union. That was not over very quick. There is, okay, so MIDI Doctor says a campaign for North Africa is a computer war game turned into a board game. So there is substantial accuracy to this statement, except that it wasn't, intentionally designed that way. It was just kind of Richard Berg kind of followed his design muse, and that's what we got. There is really no commercially viable computer games in 1980, right? I mean, I think the Atari 2600 might have been out at that point, and there's some things like that, but we didn't see anything as sophisticated as Campaign for North Africa. Whereas now we have the computing power and all that to take advantage of this. But it's interesting that you should mention this, because I feel like Gary Grigsby's War in the East, and probably War in the East too, and definitely War in the West, owe a lot to Campaign for North Africa, because you can do a lot of the things with specific types of supply, and I don't know about that, but you can kind of build and design your own combat units by mixing and matching different combat elements in the divisions that you're representing, right? Mo from Mo's Game Table. Mo, thanks for stopping by. Mike Reed says Pax Britannica would be a good candidate for conversion. Another thing that got mentioned, I think, in our interview last week with Alan Emmerich is that they're putting some automation in the Frank Chadwick CTO project, Vassal modules. Vassal will support that some certain types of automation up to a certain point. Relatively, but that requires more coding and all that stuff. So relatively few Vassal module designers do that. One of the ones that does, off the top of my head, there's others, of course, is the GTS Vassal modules, which have like a pretty sophisticated combat calculator and other stuff like that in there. It's pretty cool. Carl Fung, thanks for stopping by. So yeah, I have less advertisements than anything on Amazon Prime, and maybe I'll take 5 minutes to rant about what a true piece of drudgery season 2 of Rings of Power is tonight. I'm still struggling through it, man. I'm trying. I'm really trying. Anyway, there you go. That's what she said. My wife says this a lot too, to be fair. I thought so too, and I thought there was some kind of delay at the port or something like that. So maybe they just haven't charged for it yet, but I didn't think I got charged for it. So, oh, very nice. GURPS Traveler Far Trader. In general, other than using the GURPS system, I like the GURPS Traveler product line a great deal for a couple of reasons. One, they tackled some topics that were not handled in Traveler, but were not discussed in Traveler materials before. Like there's a whole book on the nobility, for example. And yeah, we got something on that, but not much, and certainly not the how many 128-page book that GURPS Traveler did on it. Far Trader's another one. It's got like this complete economic system that is built on GURPS, but you could use it in a different kind of Traveler if you wanted to, with, I think, relatively easy conversion. And that is it's a really interesting and powerful book. Let me put it that way. Anzio has step reduction. Not only does Anzio have step reduction, but it is unit swapping to handle step reduction. There are games like that. It's generally considered kind of awkward to do it. I want to say the last game, Europa does a lot of it, but not for step reduction. It's because the TONE of this division changed in July of 1943. So in July 1, 1943, you pull that counter out and replace it with a different counter. There's a ton of that. But there's no step reduction as such. Anzio, on the other hand, has tons of step reduction, and you have to swap counters out because usually there's 4 or 8 steps in a lot of the units, something like that. Okay, so Carl says last gamble counter problems are that they just fall off the sprues. I mean, this has been generally the case with a lot of Compass releases for the past several years, to be honest about it. Yep. There you go. This is exactly what I said. I'm not sure if you were here yet when I said it, but you probably were. All right, John Stanley, thanks so much. Speaking of supplies, the U.S. deuce and a half, the most, the Soviets may have thought so, although they downplayed the degree to which Western Allied assistance was decisive in their war against Germany in 41 to 45. But a lot of that was propaganda. Most American analyses seem to feel that there was a significant impact. And the American trucks that the Soviets got was a big deal. Yeah. So, and don't forget something like the Red Ball Express, right? Remember that in 44, 45, most German supply was transported by horse-drawn wagons, not by trucks, more might have been by rail actually, but more so wagons than trucks. I don't think the U.S., other than in a couple of weird cases, like in Sicily, where they might have, I'm not sure the U.S. ever used horse-drawn wagons in World War II. So, if you've ever done miniatures, that's what a sprue is. So, I agree with this. I have torn relatively few counters in this way, but I won't say it never happens. I tore one of the counters from Axis Empire's Ultimate Edition. I repaired it with white glue, of course. All right, Perfidious Albion says, during the opening phases of Barbarossa, a lot of Russian units were at exaggerated strengths. Well, certainly they thought so. Russian obsession to meet strength quotas without adequate support. Yeah, well, and you know, they had generally hardware shortages too, right? So it's been a while for me, but I believe my last concert was after. My last concert was technically the 4th of July concert of Blossom this past 4th of July, but that was like 15, it was more than that. It was like 30 or $35, something like that. But yes, and furthermore, a notionally similar system is found in Frank Chadwick's Third World War series with the unit proficiency rating, which is kind of described as a combat effectiveness rating, but it degrades as you continue to use the unit, and it basically functions just like steps. So, well, not just like steps, because just like steps implies that all it's doing is decreasing the combat factor. And the unit proficiency doesn't decrease in Third World War, doesn't decrease the combat factor, but it's a modifier on the roll based on the differential in proficiency rating between the attacker and the defender. This is certainly where I have used. I wonder if it actually dates back to lead miniatures, actually. So I believe we all know that. All right, Carl, thanks for stopping by. We will see you this weekend. Yeah, I mean, you can do a lot with the like the. I mean, I did build models as a kid. But I wouldn't say I was like super duper hardcore into it. I was more into modeling when I was playing 40K, which would have been something like 91 to 96 or something like that. And yeah, you would keep the sprues because you could, there were things you could do with them, right? So there you go. Aaron has looked up the actual definition of sprue, a channel through which metal or plastic is poured into a mold. So in this context, remember, I've worked in, I'm not sure how often or if at all I've mentioned this, but I did at one point, this was more or less right out of high school, I did work in an injection molding factory at one point. We did not make plastic miniatures. We made toilet seats and a variety of wheelchair parts. So... War in the West. I've monkeyed with, I think I've got some video on War in the West somewhere. It might be over here, it might be on the digital channel, but I didn't get very far with it because I was kind of baffled by the air system. If you can learn that game, I think it has a lot to offer. Well, if this wasn't the case, then they would have. Remember, the rail lines don't run everywhere. It is Russia, after all. And there's the whole rail gauge problems and things like that. And they thought they were just going to be able to run on captured Russian rolling stock, and that didn't work out at all. So, okay. So it's coming, but not yet. And that's fine. I just didn't. What I don't want to happen is for it to charge, and then I don't get charged because something happened that there's a problem and I don't know about it and I can't fix it and end up not getting the thing. That would be unacceptable. So this is true too. The pack animals were used in Burma as well. That's absolutely right. But that is an unusual situation. And that did not happen in France and Germany. At least not appreciably. Let me put it that way. All right. Drew asks, are there many terms that are used to describe games between themselves besides I go, you go, like Dorothy rules for a Napoleonic game with formations? I am not really 100% following the question here. And maybe I'm being dense today because I had a very long week last week. This week's just started. Today was fine. Just describe games besides I go, you go. I tend to call games that break away from, let's say we have a game like a GCACW, and I realize the mechanic is different here. say we have a game like Eric Lee Smith's Civil War or GCCW or BCS, where you've kind of got a pulsed activation system. That's how I tend to describe those, as opposed to I go, you go. I go, you go to me implies I go, now I'm done, now you go. And many I go, you go games are not that pure about it. You'll have some kind of reaction phase. OCS has that. For example, in ASL, your movement is basically interactive, right? Because you could get shot unless you're just coming in from opposite sides of the board, which is not a typical ASL scenario setup in my experience. That there are scenarios like that, but those tend to not be the ones you want to play for that exact reason. But you've got the movement part of the turn in ASL is very interactive. Let me put it that way. So very few I go, you go games are quite that pure about it nowadays anyway. And I think nowadays extends back to at least to the mid 80s. Yeah, like I said, maybe I'll get to ranting about it at the end of the show. I don't want to do a mid-show rant on it. All right. U.S. hired local livestock to put field people. Yeah, this is true too. This is actually true. But that's, again, these are isolated cases, and you're not like you're not running the Red Ball Express on horseback, right? So, Far Trader and Mercenary. Mercenary is a good book too, but Mercenary is a more mechanical book, which means it's tied more tightly into GURPS, at least from my recollection, than some of the other books were. Like Nobles, you almost don't just buy that, honestly. All right. So it's not terribly uncommon for there not to be complete parity between what a step means on one side of the game versus the other side of the game. A classic example is, I mean, I could go back to OC. I mean, I know it's not XTR, but XTR did do this a few times that I could think of. And I wasn't the most experienced guy with XTR stuff, but I did play a few of them back in the day. And the OCS would be an example here, right? Where you've got Soviet rifle divisions that typically will have 2, maybe 3 steps versus German infantry divisions that will have 4 steps. But there is a manpower difference there too, at least the paper strength divisions. And if they're not paper strength, then they should have a hit or 2 on them. Are between the German divisions and the Russian divisions. The German division is about the strength that manpower-wise of a Soviet corps. So to within a error margin of error anyway. So as Jeff Beeler points out, in Third World War, you can rebuild the units, but the Warsaw Pact units can never be rebuilt back up to their maximum again. They actually did a very nice thing in the Compass version with this, where the flip side is that single reduction where it's 1 lower proficiency. So you don't have to tote around as many of those hit markers. So I never did this, but you could totally do this. There you go. Oh, totally. This is totally true. Oh my God. And it's worse now, if anything. I will occasionally see a TikTok or something like that with somebody's fancy 40K models, and they'll be beautiful, and I'll be like, I used to play 40K. I could play 40. And then I go, almost never do I actually take the next step, which is to go look at 40K stuff on the internet. And then I look at the prices. I'm like, yep, I'm good. We're good here. Nope. Thank you. Have a nice day. I did pick up or acquired. I don't remember where this even came from, but I did acquire a copy of MMP's Last Stand, which I believe is by a Japanese designer, as I recall. It's a good-looking game, too. Ground Forces is nice as well. So the whole line was really good. They did deck plans. I've got deck plans. I actually took my duplicates of the GURPS Traveler deck plans up to Noble Knight. I kept one of each. So, I'm trying to think of when I saw Rush. I want to say 87, 88. That sounds about right. And our opening for Rush when I saw them at the old Richfield Coliseum, which is where the Cavaliers were playing at the time, which was like 30 miles south of Cleveland, out in the middle of friggin' nowhere. It has been bulldozed as far as I'm aware now. But Eric Johnson opened for Rush, and he was friggin' incredible. Chit Pull CDG card-driven game. This is actually another point. There's a lot of games. This is why we often qualify when the game has cards. Well, it's not a card-driven game. It's a card-assisted game. Which, okay, I mean, but a card-driven game is assisted by the cards too, right? So there's a spectrum when we say CDG of the kinds of mechanics that we typically, that we mean, and somebody hearing the term might have a more limited experience with card-driven games and might just assume that he means it works like Twilight Struggle, right? Which is the way the cards work, is a fairly traditional implementation where it's okay, there's a points value on the card. You can either, when you play the card, you either play it for the event or you play it for the points, and then you can do things with the points. But Twilight Struggle in particular does the additional step of saying, if it is your opponent's event and you play for the points, the event happens anyway, which is a huge deal in Twilight Struggle, right? So there is an asymmetric turn structure, and Third World War's got a lot of things happening in it, actually. A lot of very interesting things. I am quite certain that these games were not the first games to include an asymmetric turn structure, but I would have to think harder about it to figure out where that appeared earlier. But I suspect that it did. All right, so I think we're talking about Gary Grigsby's War in the East here, or are we talking about SPI's War in the East? Because YG, I just take as I go, you go. I think we're talking about Gary Grigsby's War in the East, thinking about it. Dogboats. Which one was the first one? Was it Dogboats was the original one? It was, Dogboats was, if this is the game I'm thinking of, it's Joe Carter's first game. And it was not, this is the famous one that Wayne did the video on where he threw it in the garbage. But I think that was Dogboats. It was not particularly well received. So good on you, Charles Latorre, for taking one and working on this game. I think it's good when people, hey, I got it. I might as well try and get some fun out of it, right? Even if maybe, you know, big mouths like myself had bad things to say about it. I think that's good. Alistair Logie saw Rush in Glasgow in the late 80s. That sounds awesome. This would have been, Hold Your Fire, I think was, Roll the Bones was the tour I went to. I can tell you that. It's a good album, too. And Perfidious Albion saw Rush at Maple Leaf Gardens. They are, in fact, Canadians. So, Jeff Beeler. There you go. I was expecting Jeff Beeler to weigh in on the topic of Rush, since they were, in fact, well, they are, in fact, Canadian. Oh, that's pretty cool. That is pretty cool. All right, we are actually Devil Boats was yeah, okay. Dog Boats was the follow-up, and I don't have the sense that Dog Boats had some of the problems that Devil Boats had. So, and there's a new one coming as well. I think it might even be out already. Schnell Boats. So, oh, there you go. Don't forget the affiliate link. So I'm going to say this again. I am kind of stunned that the campaign for advanced, because this has been sitting on Noble Knight's website for $7.75 for quite a while. So I'm pretty stunned that this got done as fast as it did. Let me put it that way. Then again, we did kind of have a show where I did very little except talk about how cool it was at Noble Knight. So there's that. Ooh, Grace Under Pressure. Very good. At Madison Square Garden, which I've seen the outside of, but I've never been inside. I'd have seen Kiss, but that would have been in the mid-90s, and I don't even remember what friggin' Kiss tour it was, to be completely honest. So, remember the Battles in the East Volume 2 is coming, and I have pre-ordered Operation Typhoon, their new version of Operation Typhoon, too, because why not? Even though there's Operation Typhoon. But having it with nice new pieces and stuff. My copy is punched, and I bought it punched off of eBay. And incidentally, I am still running eBay searches for a couple of additional SPI soapboxes. These are just ones that I felt like I didn't really need because I already have, like, for example, the Conflicts in American History, which is scandalously rare and goes for an absolutely asinine amount of money when it does pop up, which is very seldom. All that is 2 battles out of the Blue and Gray games that have some, like a teaching guide in it, and there's like 4 copies of each battle. And it's Cemetery Hill and Antietam, I think. That sounds right. Maybe. I'm not 100% sure that I'm remembering the battles correctly, but that's basically what it is. I don't need that. If I stumbled across that for $200, I might throw that much money at it just to have it, but that would be an investment purchase, and I don't normally make investment purchases. I have a retirement fund for that. If I want to invest, I'm not investing in Wargames. I'm picking up Wargames because I think there's something neat about them that I want to see or more likely want to play. The Star Force trilogy, for example, I had that back in the day in the soapbox, and that's the thing that got destroyed by mold. It would be cool to have, but it generally runs for north of $400, and I've got the 2 better games in the box already. I've got Star Force in a box, and I've got Outreach in a flat. I'd love to have Outreach in a box, to be fair, but it's kind of, and they did put it in a box, but it's kind of hard to get. But in any case, I've got Outreach, and that's my favorite of the games from that anyway. And Wellington's Victory, I've got the TSR version. So then again, I actually don't currently have the TSR version of Terrible Swift Sword. Let me put it that way. Star Soldier was the 3rd game in the set. It was the one I liked the least. I won't say it's a bad game. I just found it less interesting than the other games in the box. So, well, Solitaire State Secede. Is there a? This is another terminology question, though. When we say a solitaire game, there's a number of different things that we might mean. We might mean, oh, for shit's sake. All right, we're having a technical problem here, folks, although StreamYard is working fine, so it's not, it didn't break that. But the comments app crashed. So let's see if we can get that fixed. All right, we'll see if it actually works. So, when we say a game is a solitaire game, or we played this solitaire game, there's a number of things that we could mean. We could mean it's a 2-player game or a 5-player game, but we just played it with ourselves, right? Okay, cool. Thank you, Eric Goebel, for saying something so that I can tell that is actually working. We could mean that it is a 2-player game that has some kind of solitaire mechanism or consideration in it, or it could just be a solitaire game, right? Just saying it's a solitaire game might not be as clear for somebody that doesn't know what questions to ask as it could be. Task Force Alpha Centauri. I assume we're talking about Star Force here, and it's a pretty neat game. For a number of reasons. One, it's a really serious attempt to do a simulation of what space combat could theoretically be like. I don't think Redmond Simonson, who is the designer of that, by the way, which is unusual. He didn't design that many games, but did the graphics for a lot of SPI's output. If I don't know about all, but it's a lot. So that's interesting. It's got a kind of interesting, but not a lot of material for it. Interestingly developed future history, which is then extended into Outreach and Star Soldier as well. It's got plotted simultaneous movement, which is interesting because of the way the FTL works in Star Force. I think it's pretty interesting. There is a new version of it in development, which will remove the plotted simultaneous movement. I want to say Joel Miranda's working on it for Decision. We'll remove the plotted simultaneous movement, but from what Doc is saying, it's still going to have the same effect. So we'll see what that looks like when it happens. I was all into Outreach if they were going to ever do that, but they keep putting it in the polls that they do, and it never ends up on top for whatever reason. I pretty much became aware of the police right around the time of Every Breath You Take, I think. there you go. That is a great idea. I don't have that. So we got to make one fund working. Technically there's two, but neither of them are allocated to this. So, all right. Thanks, Eric, for stopping by, Mustache. And if you are still at odds and don't have anything to do after the show is over in approximately 20 minutes, hop over to Eric's Table Napoleonic Battles, and they will be playing La Bataille de la Moskva. So there you go. Yeah, it's a weakness of the terminology that when we say solitaire, it's not necessarily clear as to what we mean, and the person we're talking to probably will ask additional questions about exactly what we mean, right? Now, when Nerd has the Star Force trilogy, as kids, we love the orbital bombardment counters that depicted craters. That's in Star Soldier. They use them whether the scenario called for them or not, which sounds great to me. We did that kind of stuff with Squad Leader back in the day. And you know, to some extent, I'm positive we weren't playing it right, but still, we had fun with it. So there's that. So, but yeah, it's a cool box. What's the other one that I'm missing? The other one that I'm missing, I think, is War in the East. There might be another one that I'm not thinking of. They released War in the East 2nd edition by itself in the soapbox as well. And I don't need that. I've got War in Europe. So, you know, again, if I see it for 100 or 150 bucks or something like that, I might grab it just to have it. But again, that would be an investment buy and not something I'm buying because I want to either play it or examine it for how it's doing things, which is a lot of the reasons why I picked up a decent amount of the SPI stuff that I did, because SPI is super important. Avalon Hill is too. But where I am, I remember when I was getting into war games for that second time more seriously in the 90s, SPI was long gone. And I won't say I had no SPI games or played none, but I didn't play very many. And that first pass, even though I started with SPI, was almost exclusively Avalon Hill because that's what I could get. So my formative experiences, even though, again, I started with SPI games out of S&T, my formative wargaming experiences were from Avalon Hill. So now I'm finding myself looking at more SPI stuff because it was stuff I never had, right? As opposed to Avalon Hill, where I have reacquired a fair chunk of Avalon Hill stuff. But in a lot of cases, it's stuff that I had. It's a nostalgia that made me buy it again, right? So things like Guns of August or War and Peace, and I do still have the old War and Peace. Well, I should say I reacquired it. I did ditch that copy at some point. I'm not sure when or why. Some other examples. But I picked up some Avalon Hill stuff that was like, I never had this back in the day, and it was interesting. Flat Top is one of those games that I never had. I was aware of it, of course, because I combed through that Avalon Hill color catalog many, many times. And now that I tell people that's one of my favorite Avalon Hill games. Same deal with Wooden Ships and Iron Men. So Eric Hansen says that Outreach is one of his all-time faves. Yeah, it's a really unique game. It's a game that has some amount of paperwork and bookkeeping, but not a ton compared to something like Stellar Conquest or much less Federation and Empire. Holy fuck. Fed and Empire is crazy, and I am not objecting to that because I don't mind that, but a lot of people will be run really, really cold on that. So the scale of the game, this is the cool thing about Outreach, actually. It is a true 4X game, which is not really true of Star Force or a lot of games that we sometimes call 4X games, like Twilight Imperium, for example. I don't think Twilight Imperium is a 4X game. I haven't played the new edition, but there's not really much of an exploration element to it. And the first couple editions, I'm not sure there was any at all. Ooh, Double Blind. So, yeah, this is true. However, Double Blind is the original way of doing it, right? If we trace war games back to Kriegspiels, those were always refereed games. So they were always double blind. So yeah, this comes out of war games, but it also comes out of this predates modern commercial hobby wargaming too, right? Ooh, I have heard the term Tuckerization And this does occur, but I'm not sure I've heard the term in relation to war games. And there's plenty of examples of this. Not necessarily the creator of the game. So the famous example is, of course, one of the famous example is, of course, Terrible Swift Sword, where Richard Berg didn't have I might be getting some of the details of this wrong, but you'll get the gist of it. He couldn't find the name of a particular regimental commander, I think, so he just put the name of his dentist or lawyer or something like that in there, and it snuck in, and then somebody copied his order of battle and got caught pants down plagiarizing. Plagiarism might be too strong of a word, but maybe it isn't. And I believe somebody was the Fresno Games Association, by the way, as I recall. I could be wrong about almost any of that, but obviously the obvious example, probably better known, is Squad Leader, which had like a bunch of the playtesters got their own leader counters. So there's a lot of that. There you go. Stigler's flat top videos are very good, by the way. So there's that. Very good. Very good. That's kind of cool. So, so I don't think I'm going to have to think about how I want to say this, because there is a certain amount of slop in the simulating model that is used in Fed and Empire that really doesn't make any sense. You just have to eat that and recognize that it's a science fiction game and it's doing this, and this, and it's not really trying to do these other things. So yeah, and I would describe this as it's abstracted out, right? The Federation should not have dozens of ships. They should have thousands of ships, right? But you're not going to have a game with thousands of ships. That would be ridiculous. So I like this too, Mo, by the way. Bloody April. There you go. Well, something like that. So, but the legendary Fresno Games Association, and they're not legendary for reasons that are good. So, Mike Reed says that CV is superior to flat top. CV from Yaquinto. Am I getting the game right on that? And this might be true. If we're talking about the thing I think we're talking about, which comes later than flat top. So they're both going to be S. Craig Taylor designs, and CV is going to be the later of the two. And if so, then that might represent a more refined game system, if so. And I certainly see room for refinement in flat top. You could definitely streamline the thing, but it's just so good on its own that I don't want to do that. So there's a game, Craig Alexander, called CV from Yaquinto, if I'm remembering all this correctly. So but I've never owned nor played CV, so I cannot comment on this. So this is, well, okay, there's a great example. Whoops, sorry about that. If that made a big noise, that was me punching the microphone. Speaking of this, there's examples of this on YouTube, in the YouTube wargaming space, and Meandering Mike did it recently, where it was like, he ran a zombie game, and David Thompson and Liz Davidson and me and Grant Alexander and maybe some other people were all guest stars in the zombie game. And of course, Stuka Joe did that back in the day with the now legendary B-17 Queen of the Skies playthrough. I was not active on Wargaming YouTube at that time, though, so I was not a featured individual. So that has even happened at the time. So Mike Reed clarifies, yeah. So it would definitely have been after Flat Top, which was originally produced through Battle Line. What I read, I was looking at an old issue of Dragon magazine, and there was actually an article on Flat Top in it. Incredible. This was in the issue number 30s or so. And I'm like, oh, well, check this out. And I went and looked at the article, and it's by S. Craig Taylor. So there you go. So who designed the thing? And yeah, CV, I think, was midway, and Flat Top is basically Coral Sea. Although, like a lot of actions happen in that general vicinity. So there's other things you can do other than Coral Sea with flat top. Prophetic Albion says, using the CV flat top system as it was applied to bombers was too much of a good thing. Sheer scope of daily raids can be overwhelming. This is true in flat top. Yeah, it's kind of a lot of work running the bigger scenarios. Well, really, even the medium-sized scenarios. Just running the missions, right? Running the air missions, assembling your air groups, and different planes have different capabilities and ranges and all that, and endurances and all that stuff. And you got to kind of bear all that in mind. And if your stuff ditches because it ran out of fuel, you lost it, right? It counts as a loss in that case. City, I think it was City Fight. So there's City Fight and Firefight. I think it was City Fight that did this. So the designer of City Fight was Stephen Donaldson. This is not Stephen R. Donaldson, the fantasy author. This is Stephen Donaldson, Donnie the Punk, who has a Wikipedia article about him. And he had an interesting and not exactly great life, and has left us long, long ago. But he worked for SPI at one point. And if you look at the names of the City Fight characters, because it's a man-to-man game, they're a bunch of punk rock people. So I don't know the ranks. I don't remember the ranks. I've never owned City Fight and have no intention of picking it up. So not because it stinks, but because it's not in my interest area. And there's plenty of SPI stuff that I would acquire first. And I am in no sense trying to collect all the SPI stuff. I have room for 4 more inches of SPI boxed games. Let me put it that way. And I cannot bleed any more than this. At that point, however, I will have plenty of SPI games, so I'll be satisfied. I actually kind of do already. So both Kursk, by the way, and the Decision Highway to the Reich came via Fucko. In one case, it was him having Toten's a mutual buddy from Columbus, their stuff up to Noble Knight as well. That was the same fellow that had his Case Blue sent up there. And I will point out, by the way, that some people were like aghast when they put it up for sale for $1,200, but it's sold. So that is how they figure that out, right? So if it's selling for a crazy price, it's because they think they're going to get a crazy price for it. This was lingering for a while, by the way. So they might have ended up lowering the price, but at that point, I got a campaign to finish, and it's finished. I will have a new campaign announcement, hopefully the week after next, because remember, next week, no shows. So we are at 9:52. So you know what time it is? It means that is time to complain about the Rings of Power. All right, so I'm on, I think, episode 4. I think I finished episode 4. And the way this is working for me is I can stand it for somewhere between 20 and 30 minutes, and then I have to turn it off, and I turn it back on and resume that episode in like a week, get through another half an hour of it, and then I'm frustrated by it. So it's one of the things that is frustrating about it, though, is how well the show is doing on certain more technical aspects. And I don't mean the special effects. The special effects are really good. But there's a really cool scene in I think the first episode, which is a stupid scene, but the effects are good. And I would not have noticed this. Okay. I was watching somebody, a creator who's into this, and I backed her up just to make sure she was right about this. And okay, everybody who's bailing right now, thanks so much. But she pointed out that there is a scene at the end of I think it's episode 4, and I've seen the scene. It is cool. Where I'm going to spoil this, so plug your ears or tune out if you don't want to hear it. But I'm not spoiling anything good. So Galadriel has consistently been the worst aspect of the show. And I will finish season 2, by the way, but I'm just saying it's going to take me a while because I'm frustrated with it. So there is a scene at the end of episode 4, season 2, where Galadriel is captured apparently by Adar, who is the sort of orc father character. There's a whole bunch of theories as to who this dude might be. some of which are interesting, but which they don't have the rights to do, which they have to get special permission from the estate, which maybe they can try and do. But he greets her in Quenya, and it's Quenya, and he addresses her by her Quenya name, Altariel. Galadriel is her Sindarin name. Most of the high elves have the names in both, right? And it's really pretty cool. And the video that I watched pointed out that he is speaking with the correct accent, which is kind of a lisp type of, like, somewhat like Castilian Spanish. So they're getting a lot of that little nitnoid stuff right. What they're getting wrong is actually being compelling and making the story make sense. And even on its own terms, I don't think this story makes any friggin' sense at all. So I am in terms of enjoyment, I am enjoying their Wheel of Time adaptation considerably more, but I am way less close to that property at this point than I am to Tolkien. So, and when I had decided to take a reading break, what did I do? I went and picked up the Book of Lost Tales, of all things. So there's a lot to not like, and it is the problem. Many people are misunderstanding or misstating, in some cases intentionally, the problem. The problem is that the writing is bad. In general, the acting is okay, or better in some cases. In general, the cast is okay or better. The writing is bad. It is just bad. And to some extent, that's got to be the fault of the people running the show, the quote-unquote showrunner as well, right? So, in any case, thank you, Charles Latora, for coming by, and Mr. Mark Herman, thanks for stopping by, and we will see you this weekend, which is going to be bad. But yeah, I'm finding it more frustrating than pleasurable at this point. If you've seen any of the press stuff on the show, you recognize that Círdan the Shipwright makes an appearance in season 2. Ben Daniels is playing Círdan the Shipwright, and I think he does a very good job. But what's cool about Círdan the Shipwright? Okay, what is the noteworthy thing? There's 2 noteworthy things about Círdan the Shipwright that maybe less crazily intense fans will know. One, he's got a beard. He's the only elf that's described, certainly in The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, with a beard. There might be another one somewhere in some of the other material. Cool, he's got a beard, and he looks great. And then he shaves it off in in the same episode. I'm like, what the are you doing? This is part of why the character is cool. The reason Círdan has a beard is because he is the oldest elf in Middle-earth. There's a reason why. So elves will eventually grow beards. They just have to be super duper old. And Círdan is super duper old. He was born at Cuiviénen, the lake in the east of Middle-earth, where the elves awoke originally. So he's super duper old. He's older than everybody else, explicitly including Galadriel, who might be the second oldest elf in Lord of the Rings. But I'd have to think about that. She's definitely older than Elrond, but possibly not older than Glorfindel. So to some extent, yes, I will. One can recognize that the writers and showrunners and all the people involved are in a challenging situation where they don't have the rights to everything that they would like to have the rights to. But over and above that, I think that the story doesn't make any sense. And that I have a bigger problem with. Not even just in the context of, yeah, I'm sitting here reading the Book of Lost Tales for enjoyment. That kind of criticism. But I think the story doesn't make much sense on its own terms. So the like a lot of the technical aspects, like the filming technical aspects, the special effects and the cinematography and the costumes and all that stuff is generally really well done. You can definitely tell that they're pumping a lot of money into this thing. I wish that they had taken a quarter of that and spent it on the Wheel of Time instead, which is less technically amazing. but which is also differing in a lot of really important ways from the source material. But I don't have this sort of affection for the Wheel of Time that I do for the Tolkien Legendarium. So I will, like I said, I will force myself to watch the rest of it, and I hope there's cool stuff. And Tom Bombadil shows up in this season too, and I absolutely don't like the portrayal of Tom Bombadil. I think the actor they got is maybe not the right actor, but maybe he's fine, and it goes back to the writing. I think it's the writing. I really think it's the writing. Mark Herman has spoken very highly of Slow Horses, and when I do resubscribe to Apple TV, which will happen, that is one of the things on my list of things I want to watch. So, along with a variety of other things that they've done, including the 8th Air Force thing, Masters of the Air, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So I just have to get by. Yeah, he just doesn't seem, this dude is way too laid back. I mean, so there's a sense in which Tom Bombadil should be super laid back and a sense in which he shouldn't be. And it just doesn't seem, there's a certain manic energy that is required for Tom Bombadil, and we're not getting that. That could be the actor, but I think it's the writing, because the writing is what's bothering me about everything else. So, this is probably, that's on Apple? Really? Or I thought that was on Max. I could be wrong. The direction, I don't think the direction is the problem. I think it's remember the director is directing the screenplay that the writers wrote, right? So almost never is the director, let me rephrase this. In a lot of movies, the director is kind of the main guy in charge, right? At least that's the perception from the moviegoer. That's not really true. The producer is probably the person that's arranging the money. So they've got more say in some ways, but the director does the directing, right? I've seen very few examples of a film where I thought it was the directing that was the biggest problem in the movie. One example where it might be the case is in Battlefield Earth, where the directing is also, but everything about that movie is screamingly bad. So I cannot really say that that's the director's. It's bad because the director screwed up. It's bad. It's just bad. But it was bad to me in an enjoyable way. All right, folks. So a couple of reminders here. We have the show tomorrow with Dan, which right now we don't have a guest lined up, so it might just be me and Dan. So tune in. If it's just me and Dan, you can guarantee that we will be talking about a lot of completely random shit. We've got the Stellar Horizons 2 first look video, the Kickstarter for that. And the reason why the video is not officially out yet, by the way, is because the Kickstarter's not live, and I want to put the link in the video description, and I don't have that yet. So I have not seen Megalopolis. It has been very divisively received. I will 100% watch Megalopolis. I might hate it. It seems very stylized from the clips I've seen. But I really like Adam Driver, and he's in it. And I really like a lot of the other performers in it, too. So, yeah, I'll check out Megalopolis at some point, but not in a theater. I'm fine with seeing it at home from the comfort of my chair. We're trying to get some more videos done for next week, because I'm not going to do any live shows next week. So remember that. And once again, Brant from the Armchair Dragoons and whoever he has lined up to do this is going to run a show in this time slot. So check that out if you want. And then there might be an unboxing on Thursday. We'll see. But if it's going to happen, I got to get it done tomorrow. So I've heard really good things about the Penguin, and the co-star with Colin Farrell's an amazing actor. And makes me wonder why Alexander wasn't better than it was, but I don't think it was his fault. And if you watch The Batman with Robert Pattinson and watch Colin Farrell is invisible in the movie. You'd never know he was in the movie. So the Numenor storyline sucks too, to be fair. The Hobbit storyline, the Hobbit and the Stranger storylines, I think are the most compelling things in the show. I don't think they're that interesting. And I have a hunch that we're going to get the boring news that the Stranger is just Gandalf and it's all boring, and that the evil wizard that Ciaran Hinds is playing is Saruman, and it's going to be boring. But again, I'll keep watching it because I love the source material and I will continue complaining about it. In any case, folks, we have had a great show tonight, so I want to thank everybody for coming out. There's a whole bunch of ways in the video description to help support the channel. Like the video if you haven't done that already. Everybody have a great night, and there will definitely be some content from SD HistCon, even if it's just shorts. The reason why it might be just shorts is I will probably be able to upload shorts over the cellular network and not be reliant on the hotel's Wi-Fi. So there's, I don't even want to, I could go on. Okay. I could go another 20 minutes about this. There are things that are good in the show, but mostly it's terrible. In any case, everybody have a great rest of the night, and we will see you all in 2 weeks.